meat, and disease detection. Israel has also gained global attention, with organizations like the World Economic Forum and OECD adopting elements of its approach as a model for other countries.
And Israel is a relatively small player in volume, but a very high power player in the quality and the agility of how we bring products and processes to the market.
Regulatory advances are helping startups move faster, with Israel among the first countries to approve cultivated food products and advance cutting-edge medical technologies. Officials say the long-term commitment to research and development is key to sustaining momentum and attracting further international collaboration.
We're trying to capitalize as much as we can and bring forth these joint solutions on a global level.
As global demand for bio-based solutions grows, Israel is aiming to leverage its scientific and technological strengths to compete with much larger economies.
I think that's a signal for a new wave of technological collaboration, which should be and is global, and we're thankful for that.
With billions being invested worldwide in what many call the bioeconomy, Israel is positioning itself not just to participate, but to lead.
Welcome back to ILTV On the Hour. I'm David Matlin, coming to you live from Israel with the top headlines from the region, and these are the latest developments. Good to have you with us. First, Israel's Noam Bitan, on a high note, finished in second place at Saturday night's Eurovision Song Contest, the grand finale in Vienna, just losing out to Bulgaria, whose crowd-pleasing dance number took the top prize. But ultimately, Israel came in third in the popular vote, eighth in the jury rankings, had enough combined support to reach second place in the finish. It's a remarkable end to a year-long campaign by a list of European countries, including the Netherlands and Spain and Ireland, who first sought to blacklist Israel from the event, and then, when that failed, they pulled their own participation. In the case of Spain, Ireland, and Slovenia, the national broadcasters actually pulled the event from their airwaves, wouldn't even show it because of Israel's involvement. Thus, this popular vote-driven competition, where one's own country cannot vote for itself, Israel proved to be quite popular on the European stage.
Wow,
the Middle
thank
East.
you so much, everybody. I love you. Oh, Am Israel. Hi, guys.
You can feel the euphoria from Noam Bitan. Congratulations to him. The nation has been proud of him. And, of course, all stayed up late to watch that competition last night. But we do have to move on to the harder news of the day. The Middle East does appear to be moving towards another round of escalation in the war with Iran. Now, new reports indicate that Israel and the United States are engaged again in intensive preparations for the possible resumption of military strikes against Iran, with the action set to resume potentially any hour. And that's how we live here in Israel, hour to hour, since last month's ceasefire provided now a window of relative quiet, coupled with the ongoing tension, though, of the reality of the situation. Now, a senior Israeli official told Channel 12 here that a new round of fighting could last, quote-unquote, days to weeks. And the wide understanding is that the negotiations with Iran have gone nowhere and are going nowhere. But the final decision is expected to come from President Trump. Now, returning from China, President Trump rejected Iran's latest proposal and warned Tehran that it would either, quote, make a deal or be decimated, close quote. U.S. officials say that multiple military options have been put before the president, including a new wave of heavy strikes, targeting even deeper layers of Iran's strategic infrastructure. Other options under discussion involve U.S. special ops taking control of key positions inside Iran, potentially to capture oil facilities and the highly enriched uranium, allegedly buried at a site near Isfahan. Now, the Pentagon says more than 50,000 U.S. troops, 2 aircraft carrier fleets, and many strategic aircraft do remain deployed across the region, ready to resume operations if ordered. Now, closer to home here, the Israel Defense Force confirmed that it killed Izzadin al-Haddad. He was the current Hamas leader in Gaza and the chief of the terror group's military wing. In a precision airstrike in Gaza City, the Israeli military described him as one of the architects of the brutal October 7th massacre, and he was taken out in Gaza City's relatively affluent Rimal neighborhood, what remains of it. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Defense Minister Katz, said the slain terror chief was one of the last remaining planners of the October 7th invasion, and he played a central role in the abduction and captivity of Israelis throughout the war. Haddad took over as Hamas commander in Gaza after Mohammed Sinwar was killed in 2025 and had been working to rebuild the group's military capabilities and plan new attacks against Israel. Now, he was apparently nearly impossible to eliminate earlier in the war, always surrounded himself with Israeli hostages. Israel says that strike was intended to send a clear message that there will be no respite for those responsible for October 7th and the launching of this war, especially as Hamas is now in violation of the current ceasefire, important to mention, refusing to disarm, to step aside politically, or to relinquish their remaining pockets of territory, all required under the framework of the internationally brokered, UN-backed ceasefire and rehabilitation plan for Gaza that, again, they agreed to. But tensions are escalating again on Israel's northern front as the IDF launched a major wave of airstrikes over the last day against some 100 Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. That's following drone attacks, cross-border fire into Israel, and the death of an IDF soldier on the front again yesterday. Over the weekend, the IDF did announce the deaths of 2 combat soldiers killed in action in southern Lebanon. This was 20-year-old Staff Sergeant Negev Dagan and 24-year-old Captain Maoz Israel Rekanati. Serving on the front lines, both of them, they were hit by Hezbollah drone fire. Now, 7 Israeli soldiers have been killed in action since the ostensible ceasefire was announced over a month ago, as the IDF continues to seek and destroy their terror apparatus there. Now, Israel said the drone strikes by Hezbollah have represented a quote-unquote blatant violation of the ceasefire understandings with the group, but diplomacy is ongoing between Jerusalem and the non-Hezbollah parties in Beirut. The United States announced, along those lines, a 45-day extension of the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, following a third round of high-level talks between the Israeli and Lebanese officials in Washington. Over the last days, the announcement came from the U.S. State Department after 2 days of negotiations that were aimed at reducing tensions along the Israel-Lebanon frontier. Washington has permitted Israel to keep targeting Hezbollah anywhere that they are deemed an immediate threat. The U.S. State Department spokesman described the talks as, quote-unquote, highly productive. The U.S. has a new security track within the talks, we should say, will open at the Pentagon later this month. And while political negotiations are set to resume in early June, we'll keep you updated on any and all of those issues. But separately as well, looking at the United States here, where the authorities have charged a senior commander of Iran-backed Iraqi militia with plotting attacks against Jewish targets inside the United States. It's including a prominent synagogue in New York City, what prosecutors describe as a broader Iranian terror campaign. Now, federal prosecutors are saying that the senior commander in Kataib Hezbollah, he was detained in Turkey, transferred to U.S. custody before appearing in the federal court in Manhattan. This is a long journey. They accuse him of helping plan more than 20 attacks already carried out in Europe and Canada since February, all under the guise of sort of organic protest against the Jewish community, when in fact the IRGC has been running many of them. While also he's been directing plots targeting Americans and Jewish sites in the United States going forward. The U.S. officials say this case represents one of the highest level arrests of an Iran-linked IRGC operative since the current war began. With all that to discuss, we are joined now by Brigadier General in the IDF Reserves. He's Relik Shafir. He's a former Air Force Base commander and a popular face on the airwaves here, really on all channels. Relik, an honor to have you with us. You and I have spoken many times, and good to have you back, obviously, in this moment, a lot taking place. I want to start, I don't know if starting at the end and looking back, but let's talk about the Lebanon front right now. In light of more soldiers being killed there in recent days, it appears the army is holding strong in this area. 7 soldiers killed since the ceasefire in just over a month, but many more civilians, I would argue, might have been in harm's way or would have been in harm's way in northern Israel if not for the army's deployment in these areas in southern Lebanon. So Hezbollah appearing to do all they can to derail the peace with Beirut, or at least the efforts to make peace. Are you encouraged, though, by the ongoing diplomacy that we saw even in the last few days?
I think this has to do a lot more with Iran than with Lebanon at this time, because the Lebanese are helping the Iranians keep pressure on the United States and Israel, so that the Straits of Hormuz stalemate will not continue, and so they are agitating Israel and pushing Israel to push the United States to move, and that works for the Iranians. And since these are the proxies, then this is all part of their greater, I would say, strategy. Now, this has to do with Iran, and maybe we'll talk about that later. But in Lebanon, they're keeping a low profile of what they feel is a below breaking the ceasefire harassment. So, and that is actually what is happening, because the United States has asked for 45 more days of ceasefire, which means that they agree that this is a ceasefire, these harassments. So this has to be coordinated between Israel and the United States. And these are difficult times because we don't have an answer to these drones, and we're suffering day by day. So it's a time that we want to go into action, or at least the military wants to go into action, but it can't do so in a more than a limited way because of the whole picture, diplomatic and picture with Iran.
And we saw that in the proposals, put back from the IRGC to President Trump, where Lebanon and Hezbollah being left alone and left intact was one of their major, talking points and preconditions. So that priority, for the Iranian regime, clear that this terror proxy in Lebanon is still something they're trying to cling to. On Lebanon, though, and we hear about the solutions, let's call it that are being put forward for how this can go and what they may be talking about with Beirut. There's talk of the Lebanese armed forces, quote unquote, third parties. I read that as a UN peacekeeping force. It's hard to know what third parties we could be talking about. Could be moved into, the vacated IDF ground in southern Lebanon, but hard to accept. I mean, is the ground, quite literally just not ready even for that concept yet?
I think it's not ready because let's play the game and say that some different force other than the Hezbollah comes in. If it's the Lebanese army, well, the Lebanese army is comprised of at least 50% Shia soldiers who have a double allegiance both to the military and to Hezbollah. So obviously this is not going to be a good enough answer. And about foreign forces, well, the UN, what are they going to do if they're shot at, or if Hezbollah fires from very close to the UN posts? Is that a haven for Hezbollah when they're close to the UN? Are the UN going to fight them? I don't think so. No. Another possibility is, let's say, a French contingency force. But a French contingency force, which is an idea that had been put forward, I think, by even by Macron. Are they going to fight Hezbollah? What are we going to do if Hezbollah fires? The French soldiers do not stop them. What are we to do in this particular case? Are we going to put the French in harm's way? So really, there's no solution other than an agreement with Lebanon and maybe with Iran that Hezbollah does not cross the Litani River, does not fire, and that is part of the total agreement. I don't believe that the United States will insist on stopping all proxy activities. And I think it's part of the Iranian game is to put all emphasis on the nuclear program and and delay as much as they can so that eventually when they do give up on the nuclear, all the rest will be left untackled. That is the ballistic missiles, and the proxies. So this is an Iranian tactic, and I think that's what they're doing. And so far, they're doing okay as far as they're concerned.
I think you described that border dilemma well. I mean, we've seen that for 20 years now with UNIFIL, the UN's force up there with whether it be Indonesian, Irish, Norwegian soldiers, literally in the way often of what Israel's able to do in a defensive posture or offensive. So I think it's a hard sell to the Israeli public or government to see any kind of international force come back in. We'll see. For now, at least, we have the U.S. heavily involved in that, the international scene heavily involved in this situation with Lebanon. But on Iran, as we keep talking about, obviously, Tehran has been so obstructionist, chesty, belligerent since the ceasefire came in now over a month ago. How can this not go back to open war? Sort of what choice do we in the U.S. and Gulf allies, for that matter, have in this situation?
I think the United States miscalculated the Hormuz Straits problem, even though there were hints that the chief of staff put that on the table before the war started. But in the place we're at now, if they had time, they would choke the Iranians economically and carry on with this for a few more months. But can the United States hold that in place for a few months? Politically, for Trump, I'm not sure he can hold on because he's unpopular at this time, and the midterm elections are coming up in November. So that's what the Iranians are counting on. So he doesn't really have much of a leeway in the sense that he needs to strike soon, or else he's going to be taken as a weak president, which is the last thing that he wants to be.
And right, the Democratic process knocking on the door of our leaders of the United States. I think it's I would argue somewhat of a disadvantage in this grand geopolitical showdown with the likes of Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin or anyone in Iran here who really isn't beholden to any democratic process, not for decades. These generals who have so long to strategize, and here we are. Not that their system's better, but it's certainly a conundrum for our leaders in this moment. Really, one more thing to ask you about here. I mean, in terms of the deployments, which have been so widely reported. CENTCOM, at least revealing a good amount of what they have in the region to some degree. We have these reports, and you can see it for yourselves around central Israel, that Ben Gurion Airport is about half a U.S. Air Force base at this point, with all these terminals filled by, in the lack of international tourism, there's room for that. But all these, U.S. Air Force planes lining the tarmacs there. Do these deployments, the presence of these troops, of these assets, speak louder than really anything being said in public about what may come next?
Not really. Remember that the U.S. is holding a lot of forces outside of the United States. I'm talking about the naval outposts, the Sixth and Seventh Fleet. CENTCOM itself has a lot of forces in Europe. So the fact that they're stationed here, or let's say close to the Hormuz Straits, is not much different from the fact that they would be stationed in Europe during peacetime, so to speak. So it's not a burden, a great burden on the United States. The money or the costs would be undertaken anyway. So as far as as pressuring Iran, obviously this is necessary. And the question is, can they hold for a lot longer without being sitting ducks, or at least feeling like that? And the Iranians are trying to recoup their losses and get ready for some more hits. I think the Iranians are playing their last cards, but they're playing it well. And let me quote President Trump, who said, Iran had never won a war and had never lost a negotiation.
just one more point on the use of ground troops, which is obviously being debated right now by the United States, by CENTCOM. There's been a lot of report of the sort of the fear of heavy clashes, with the Iranian army on the ground, anywhere that could take place. Look, we have total aerial dominance in this battlefield from what we've seen, the Israel and U.S. side. Is that fear of those ground clashes somewhat overblown? I mean, should we not be so fearful of using ground forces to accomplish real strategic aims on the ground?
I think it is overblown. Let's think of what the targets could be. Could be the Harj Island. It could be the Bandar Abbas area where the straits are very narrow, and ships can be shot directly from the shore. So taking these limited areas after heavy Air Force or air dominance and support does not seem like a very difficult or painstaking effort. But it's more of a political question. It is obvious that some soldiers will probably lose their lives, even if it's just accidents on the ground. But does the United States want to put their foot on the ground, whether it be the places I mentioned or maybe the nuclear area near Isfahan? So I don't think this is what the United States is looking for. And I'm sure that unless we're talking about some commando raids here and there, they're not going to deploy a meaningful number of forces in Iran.
Relic, obviously eye-opening to speak to you, a whole host of issues that I threw your way, so I appreciate you being open to all of them and able to discuss for us and our viewers, of course. Thank you for being with us, Relic Shafir.
All right, have a good day.
Before we move on to our next topic, here's a word from our partners.
The State of Israel announces the year of Od Yoter Tov, 0% income tax for New Olim. You read that right. 0% income tax for New Olim for those who make Aliyah in 2026. And this is in addition to the existing benefits for New Olim in employment and beyond. It's simply Od Yoter Tov. 100% Zionism, 0% income tax. Now is the time to make Aliyah. For more details, visit the Ofik Israeli website.
Now to your guests, lucky to be joined by Aviv Bushinsky, political analyst and former media advisor for Prime Minister Netanyahu and a senior staffer in Israeli governments there. So Aviv, always good to have you with us, and I'd like to save the hard questions for you when it comes to election issues. But look, they really do tie in to the bigger strategic and security picture for all of us right now. First of all, on the technical, the election campaign, I think, officially kicked off by all sides in this last week. A little bit nuts that each camp, for its own reasons, appears to want early elections, whether it be the opposition, members of the coalition, or I should say at least control over the procedural process leading to it. And that may be the case for Netanyahu. Many are arguing right now, Aviv, that Prime Minister Netanyahu, in fact, does not want to bump up the elections. And I should mention to our viewers, we're talking about a change that would, somewhere between the end of October to maybe beginning of September, right? We're not talking about a major change on the calendar, but why might that minor time difference make a difference to Netanyahu?
First of all, I totally agree with you, David. Elections will be, and I don't see any scenario that Netanyahu or his allies or anyone, or even his rivals, will try to hamper or to change or to damage the democratic procedure in having an election. The debate is actually about the date. For some reason, the coalition, mainly Netanyahu, would not like it to happen on September and try to extend it as possible, perhaps on October, for various reasons, all kinds of strange reasons. Each party has its own agenda and obligations. But by the way, looking at the elections in 2019, I think it was the first and only time that Israel had an election on September. And to be honest with you, David, the Likud party at that time ended up with 32 seats, and the religious parties enjoyed the same numbers as they do now in all polls. So the bottom line is that if the Likud party will end up with 32 seats, it will be a great victory for Netanyahu if you compare it to the actual polls today, that they're way under 30. So I think it's like little tiny business. It's not a big difference.
Okay.
The real thing is that Netanyahu wants to have it as late as possible for one reason, that maybe something will happen. The Iran regime will topple, some kind of a new peace treaty, or I don't know what, maybe the Messiah will come. This is the real reason.
Look, you're not the only one holding out for the Messiah here, Aviv. I know that's
I know
popular
when he's
in
coming,
this country.
but it's a different. But this is a different agenda. Yeah.
Of course. Look, and I'm glad you mentioned the war front, because I think that is the major factor with Netanyahu. Interesting to get your thoughts. A big question, but how? If you could describe a bit more how the war and its outcome or lack of outcome, factors into Netanyahu and the Israeli public, for that matter, for their position, as they approach this campaign.
Yes, because Netanyahu promised the Israeli people a few things: the ultimate victory, which yet we did not achieve in the north, quite doubtful in the south. Even though there are great achievements, even this weekend with all the different leaders and their successors, and of course the Iran regime that we all thought, though Netanyahu didn't say it bluntly, but he gave us the notion that the target is to topple the regime, and I'm not talking about the nuclear facilities, etc., etc. These things were not achieved yet, or some will say that are unachievable. But these are the things that Netanyahu promised. The thing is that on top of it, Netanyahu is carrying the some kind of a blame on October 7th. Each one will decide how wide his blame is, and is it his fault or how much. But this is a thing that he tries to run away from. And the second thing is, of course, the draft law. And the draft law is an issue that goes across all over the board. It doesn't matter if you're right or left, if you're any Zionist party wants the government to force everybody to serve and to carry the burden like everyone. And here I think that Netanyahu is losing points because doing his attempts nowadays to extend his term, he even now calls the religious party, hey guys, let's not dissolve the Knesset, let's give it a last try and pass our draft law. And the mass majority of the people think that this kind of a draft law exempts many religious people from serving in the army. So I think that hanging on there and trying to legislate this law, Netanyahu is losing points. It's sometimes it's better to cut your losses, which Netanyahu is not doing. From my perspective, unfortunately, he's not doing.
Yeah, I think it is remarkable, but true, that as much as October 7th was thought to be what would be the great referendum in any next election, it may not be. It may not be the main issue. And I think you're right. The country is more likely to focus on the draft laws, on these inequalities. Because honestly, I think Netanyahu could throw the October 7th issue right back at his opposition leaders who had their terms at the helm during this time.
That's what Netanyahu, by the way, David, what Netanyahu, by the way, said on CBS in 60 Minutes. He said, yes, we have some kind of a blame that everybody has to share regarding October 7th, but the mission is the day after. And my mission is to restore the country and bring security. So October 7th is there, but this is not the only subject.
Well, Avi, maybe I'll get you out of here on this. If you can, look, a lot of people say in politics you never count Netanyahu out. And you maybe have been one of those here. But might Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, bail out of this race in the lead up if polls look really bad, or if he gets some sort of, I know it's not exactly a pardon, but some sort of release from his corruption charges? Do you think that's something in the works?
Netanyahu is seen as the mega magician in the Israeli politics, in a way he is. That the people didn't notice, but Israel won the Eurovision contest only when the right-wingers were in power. Twice when Menachem Begin was in power, and twice when Netanyahu. So you see what kind of a magician we have here.
Interesting.
I think that nowadays people starting to sense that maybe Netanyahu is vulnerable. Maybe there is a chance that he's going to lose. And the way I see it, I don't see a chance that he will be able to get a majority in the coming elections. Then the question is, will we have the same start of a stalemate? In other words, another cycle of elections till something will arise? Or Netanyahu will say, you know, guys, it's time for me to go. I did so many things to the country, to the security. I've changed the Middle East. I think that Netanyahu now really thinks about it. And this is one of the major reasons why he wants to extend his term and to delay it as much as possible, because things are unclear. According to the polls, if you put aside the Channel 14, according to the polls, the situation is not good. And knowing Netanyahu, I think that he would not like not only to lose, but to lose to Naftali Bennett, who used to be some kind of a staffer in his cabinet. So yes, Netanyahu really thinks about it. And then another indication is that he didn't call yet for the primary elections in the Likud, and it's high time he should do it.
Well, I'm not sure he will. Aviv Bushinsky, thanks for being with us. A lot that you tackled. Appreciate you having with us. I know our viewers get a lot out of it. Thank you.
Okay.
And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. I'm David Matlin. Thanks for joining.
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Khaled Ben-David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. President Trump says the U.S. ceasefire with Iran is on life support amid continuing clashes in the Gulf as American naval forces try to reopen the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping while maintaining a blockade on Iranian ports. Iran says it is willing to negotiate, but still rejects key demands on limiting its nuclear program. Golani Special Operations Command forces gain control of Lebanon's Litani River area and clear it, eliminating dozens of terrorists in combat, while the Air Force strikes more than 100 targets in the area and the IDF seizes underground bunkers and weapon depots. Hezbollah continues to target IDF forces in South Lebanon and along the northern border, with the latest casualty, Reserves Warrant Officer Alexander Glovanyov, killed by an explosive drone. IDF airstrikes on Monday eliminate 5 terrorists advancing toward the yellow demarcation line in northern Gaza, and in a separate incident neutralized 3 terrorists who penetrated the yellow line in southern Gaza. IDF forces also destroy multiple underground targets that were used to launch terror attacks from and also to hold Israeli hostages during the Gaza war. A report by an Israeli civil commission details widespread and systemic sex crimes committed by Hamas terrorists during the October 7th attack, concluding that sexual violence was deliberately used as a method of terror in the massacre. The Knesset advances a bill to establish a special military tribunal to try Hamas terrorists who committed atrocities on October 7th under Israel's existing law for the prevention of genocide. And now our big story. With Iran remaining intransigent against U.S. demands to curb its nuclear program, President Trump's former optimism on talks with the regime have turned decidedly pessimistic, describing the ceasefire as now being on life support. It remains to be seen whether the blockading of Iranian ports will soften Tehran's resolve or more decisive military action is needed. Meanwhile, a new report based on U.S. intelligence estimates suggests Iran is quickly rebuilding and reinforcing its missile capability back to pre-war capacity, an unsettling prospect for Israel. Here's President Trump on his way to Beijing to meet one of Iran's key foreign supporters, Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Oh, I don't think we need any help with Iran. We'll win it one way or the other. We'll win it peacefully or otherwise. Their Navy's gone. Their Air Force is gone. Every single element of their war machine is gone. They've killed a lot of people. They've killed 42,000 people at least over the last month and a half. We win.
Mr. President,
no matter how you cut it. I don't think we need any help with Iran, to be honest with you. They're defeated militarily, and they'll either do the right thing or we'll finish the job. Mr. President.
And joining me now in studio is Reserves Brigadier General Amir Avivi. He's the chairman and founder of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, also known here as Habit Khoristi. Amir, thank you for joining us.
A pleasure.
Well, we heard President Trump, we're going to finish the job. He said we're going to finish it one way or the other, either in negotiations or a renewal of the war in full force. Which do you think is more likely?
I think that we're done with negotiations. It's obvious that every day that we are not attacking. It's another day where the regime feels they have the upper hand. They are going to succeed. They are going to remain with their nuclear capabilities. And therefore, we reach the point where we need to attack, and as soon as possible. And I believe that this is exactly what's going to happen.
What kind of timeline do you think it is? Because as I mentioned, there are reports that say Iran is very quickly trying to replenish its military arsenal, its missile launches, its missile creating capabilities. So what kind of time frame should be done here?
I think it should be done immediately, days, week, two. I mean, we cannot wait. We cannot wait for many reasons. Even politically, you know, both President Trump and the Prime Minister Netanyahu are going to elections soon.
That's right.
I mean, we need to finish the job. I think they understand that we have a very, very short frame time to do it. And I think it's going to come by surprise. It's going to be a very strong attack, a combination of an Israeli-American attack. I would assume that the U.S. will probably focus more on the Strait of Hormuz, Hag Island, really opening militarily this strait in a way that Iran won't have any control of the strait anymore. Israel knows how to target leaders, deal with the ballistic missiles, deal with the air defense. Each country has to really take the mission that it does best. And this is what I expect to see. Now, this will impact Lebanon as well. The moment there will be an attack on Iran, all the restrictions that the president has put on Israel in Lebanon will be lifted.
Let's leave that for the moment. We'll come to the war, the battle against Hezbollah. But going back to the attack on Iran, Prime Minister Netanyahu, in a recent CBS interview, talked about the necessity especially of dealing with this enriched uranium, which is in Iran, which is, we presume, buried in some of these sites. He talked about the possibility of an actual operation to remove it. He wouldn't go into details. It would be very difficult, complex. How likely is that? And if not, what are Israel's alternatives here?
Well, I think that the first option will always be unconditional surrender and let them hand over, the materials. But if it needs to be done militarily, I think definitely Israel and U.S. can do it.